I've thought the exact same thing about the way in which Trump was referred to as Hitler. And then there was no reckoning with the fact that that wasn't true. I actually think that's an incredibly serious matter. We had the exact same thing in the UK. There were protests against Trump. I went to them to observe them. Every other placard had Trump with a Hitler moustache, telling us that the 1930s were coming back. And none of them have apologized for doing that or reassessed the situation or admitted that they were being hysterical. They've just let it slide into history. And I think that's unforgivable. Firstly, because it describes Trump in an inaccurate way. He's not Hitler. The people who voted for him are not right-wing fascists. So they were lying about Trump, and they were lying about Trump's support base. But also, it is part of this process of Holocaust relativism, which I think is a really worrying phenomenon, because the more that you compare relatively ordinary political events in the present, the more that you compare those things to what happened in the 1930s, the more you make the 1930s seem ordinary and mundane. And it chips away at the uniqueness of the Holocaust, and it chips away at the seriousness of that moment and the fact that this was the greatest crime in human history, and contributes to the broader belief that the Holocaust was not particularly a big deal. The Nazis were bad people in the same way that Trump is a bad person. And that, again, is another example of just historical ignorance and historical illiteracy and the terrible consequences that can have for people's understanding of the past and for their understanding of what certain groups of people experienced in the 20th century. I think your idea of creating the possibility of another candidate, someone who's not Trump and who's not Trump, which is what Biden and Harris are, I think that's really interesting. And my view of political life at the moment is anything that can be done to open the door to a new possibility is worth pursuing. This is why I'm quite interested in the rise of populist parties in Europe. Now, some of these populist parties are bad. They have awful beliefs. Some are good. Some are far right. Some are far left. There are all sorts of parties. But what I think is fascinating and important and quite encouraging about them is that they are trying to create another possibility, something that isn't the conservative right-wing section of society and something which isn't the kind of collapsing social democratic wing of society, and that they're trying to open the door to something else. All forms of political experimentation, if they are driven by a desire to democratize public life and to reintroduce reason and freedom and equality to the heart of public debate, anything that does that, I think, should be welcomed and encouraged.
Yeah, I agree. It must be. And the basis for it being incredibly vibrant is there, but it is going to be shouted out of existence before it gets a chance to actually flourish. Now, I agree with your analysis about the 1930s, and the real hidden danger here is that we have robbed the very special and important claim that something is Hitlerian of all meaning, so that as it returns, we can no longer invoke it and have it resonate. And I must say, I feel this, both as, an analytically focused person who recognizes that must be the case, but also as a Jew who knows that, I'm beginning to hear a kind of commonplace anti-Semitism in this woke ideology that is so familiar from what I read about and heard about as a young person that I know the danger isn't where we were told it is, and it is exactly in the hands of those who are shouting Nazi this, Nazi that.